it on at night. Trust me, if you were a older middle-aged woman, nothing you do.
I would be younger then.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Public Works Finance and Safety Committee meeting of Monday, May 17, 2021. Roll call, please.
Albertson?
Well, I'm here, but my light won't light, so. Here.
Bueller?
Here.
Hoyer?
Here.
Pauline?
Here.
Lallam?
Here.
Manti?
Here.
Rademski?
Here.
Roby?
Here.
Zillhauer?
Here.
Y?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion by Helene and a second by Y. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the public comment period. This is the time set aside for anyone who would like to make a public comment to step forward and do so. We do have a sign-up sheet over there for in-person comments and a policy for all. If anyone wishes to speak, please come forward, or if you're online, say permission to speak. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Okay, seeing no one, we'll move on to approval of the agenda, and I have a change to make. I will move item A to fall after item D. And with that change, I'll look for a motion. So move.
Second.
I have a motion by Manti and a second by Helene. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item B is approval of approval of a professional services agreement for on-call engineering services with Infrastructure Design Group, Inc. in the amount of up to $50,000 to be performed on a task order basis throughout the 2021 fiscal year, and authorizing the mayor to sign all applicable documents and authorizing the Public Works Director / city engineer to approve task orders.
So moved.
I have a motion by Helene and a second by Bueller, and I will ask the Public Works Director / city engineer, Heath Von Eye, to explain this item, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. So if the council could recall, we've entered into similar such agreements in the past years. 2020, we did something similar, primarily due to the staffing shortage that we had in the engineering division of Public Works. 2019, we also had a similar agreement just to help accomplish and carry out the workload throughout the construction season for 2019. Both of those years, I believe we did something similar in the dollar amount. I know we did in 2020, up to $50,000. However, we only spent roughly half that between 2019 and 2020. We only went up to about 40 some grand between those 2 years combined. So we don't anticipate needing this full 50 grand, but what we're proposing it for this year has to do with a multitude of things. One, we need some assistance on 3rd Avenue when we do the mill and overlay and new sidewalk placement because of the sidewalk assessment that we're performing with that project. We wanted to have some survey services available for us for that work. If you recall, IDG did the design on that project, so them doing the survey on it helps keep that streamlined and as accurate as possible. What we'd also use that for is also a training of sorts for our newly hired surveyor. If you guys have met recently, John Bonkowski is our new licensed surveyor, works for the city. There is still a little bit of a learning curve that he's accomplishing as we speak, learning the instrumentation, the handheld survey device equipment, the electronic instrumentation that we use now today. It's something a little bit different than what he's accustomed to, which isn't abnormal in the survey realm, where surveyors spend years on a certain way of doing things, and then when they get into something different, it becomes new to them. So we would use these services as a bit of a training period if we use IDG for surveying on 3rd Avenue, for example. The other component this contract would help address is some other training needs. IDG has a couple of staff on board that are very proficient with AutoCAD. Our recently hired staff, again, as you've met, all of, have come with a whole breadth of experiences, and the reality is their civil engineering CAD skills need a little sharpening. And they would all admit that if they were sitting here in front of us today. And so we would like to utilize IDG to help with that AutoCAD training to help sharpen their CAD skills for the civil engineering realm of work that they will be performing, that we want them to start performing for us in-house. But we do need some training to accomplish that. And so a good portion of this 50 grand, if we use that much, would end up going towards training for AutoCAD purposes as well. We're not asking for any new money here. I'd note that as well. Between the 212 CIP fund and the operating expenses that we have for engineering, we would expect to code any subsequent task orders that IDG performs to those existing budgeted funds for 2021. With that, stand by for questions. Justin Peterson is online with us as well, and as the Assistant City Engineer, he's helped spearhead this, the organization of this information as well.
Thank you. And I should add, a number of years ago when we first got Civil 3D, the entire staff upstairs in the engineering department got some training from a consultant that was familiar with and using the software, and what resulted was a really great personal relationship for bouncing ideas off and answering questions. So we've done that before. Councilwoman?
You pretty much took my
Oh, sorry.
I guess what I wanted to know was if you just continue on that same thing. By having this person come and help with the CAD in-house, do you see that as, I suppose it's a convenience thing, but do you see that as a money saver too, versus trying to farm that out to, official classes or things like that, or?
It's definitely, there are several places you could go to accomplish this training. You're exactly right, Councilwoman Manti. And, you go directly to the AutoCAD folks themselves who give outstanding trainings. We are confident that the IDG staff, they've actually done this before for staff, I believe in the city of Sioux Falls recently, where they've hired IDG to come and have sit-down sessions with them. So it probably does come at a little bit of a savings as compared to going to the AutoCAD people directly, and also helps, build that camaraderie too, not only amongst staff, but amongst staff and our consultants, and it creates those connections that way as well.
Thank you. Other questions from the council? All right, I will look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. And Dee Dee, I put your item is after D. So, item C is approval of construction change order number 1 with Gray Construction for the wastewater treatment administration building project number 1917 for an increase of $26,275 for a new project contract amount of $3,536,275.
So moved.
Have a motion by Helene.
Second.
And a second by Albertson. And I will ask the Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, to tell us about it.
Thank you, Mayor. This is change order number 1 for the new admin building out at the wastewater treatment facility. I'd note that Mike Berger and I believe Marcy Luno and then Justin are all online with us here. Marcy's the project manager assisting the wastewater division with this project. Mike's, of course, very familiar with it as well. Essentially what this change order is accomplishing, it's addressing some of the cost overruns and also some credits or deductions that we've incurred to date. The project is getting close to completion, but we're a little ways out yet from that, so we wanted to get one of these change orders processed. The brunt of the increase, I will cite here, is mainly related to the replacement of fiber line and the hardwired alarms out at the facility, and how we had to do some modifications during construction related to the wiring for the fiber network and the alarm systems at the wastewater treatment facility. There are a couple credits in there in relation to some of the things that were modified, but overall the brunt of the increase is related to the wiring modifications that were made. We will be bringing a final change order hopefully in the next couple months. This project is on track to be completed. I think it'll probably be a month, maybe 2 past the completion date, so we will be negotiating some liquidated damages later on and having those conversations between our consultant and the contractor. But as of right now, this is just more of a routine progress change order to keep up with the changes in work on the site. With that, Mike and Justin, Marcy and I will stand by for questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions, council? Pretty silent group today. No questions. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. The next item is approval of construction change order number 2 with Donek, Inc. for the 2019 Parks and Recreation Improvements Project number 1909 for an increase of $44,485.59, bringing the total contract cost to $375,370.44 and extending the completion date to September 3rd, 2021. I have a motion by Billhauer, second by Holleen, and I'll ask Mr. Von Eyck to tell us about this. And we also have the park director online if there's questions related to parks, but I'll let you start, Heath.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, absolutely. Terry Kelly, Park and Rec Director, has been working with Justin Peterson, the Assistant City Engineer, on this. What this relates to is the work at City Park, the parking lot area, and the boat launch area. If you recall, back in 2019, we had hoped to do some parking lot repairs to City Park. The high groundwater conditions, the high lake elevations that we incurred throughout the year simply prohibited the work from being accomplished. And then subsequently in 2020, same thing. Very high groundwater conditions did not accommodate for this parking lot work. So we didn't dare go dig into this work and potentially create a bigger mess than what we started with. So we put it off again last year. And now this year it's looking a lot more favorable in being able to accomplish the project. The reason for the increase is that we've expanded the scope of work. We've got additional areas that we've recognized need repair in the parking lot area and would like to include those in the project. Donek has found it amicable. They found it agreeable with them to move forward with the 2019 pricing that they gave us. And this would just be a straight line increase in cost based on the 2019 pricing in asphalt. And I believe that covers it. Oh, this, I forgot to mention the last item, the wastewater. That was within budget, by the way. This one is mostly within budget. We ended up creeping over about $6,000 over the budget amount, and TK has indicated he's got other resources from his other 212 funds that he can pull that extra $6,000 from. So again, no new money is being asked for here, and everything will be covered for out of the current fiscal year's money.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments, council? Councilman Hoyer?
Heath, just question with how wet it was historically the past couple of years. When we go into this, then are we going to be putting some fill to get it up a little higher, or is it just kind of just patchwork at this point to repair those sections?
Yeah, there won't be any major reconstruction like that, Councilman Hoyer, where we'd be doing any grade changes, simply more of a patching and replacement of existing surfacing.
Any other questions? Councilman Billhauer?
Just a comment, I drove through there last night, I'm so glad to see that this is getting addressed finally, so appreciate that. But I do have one question, not related to this particular item, but your the last sentence, or second to last sentence, after the change order, there's approximately $225,000 remaining work to complete City Park. What is anticipated there, Heath, or TK if he's online?
So that amount, Councilman Vilhauer, is essentially what is left to do all the work in City Park. So all the patchwork is going to cost that $225,000, essentially, is what that's saying.
And the patchwork consisting of?
Exactly. Let me refer to Justin or TK on that. Probably Justin, if he's online. Yeah, Justin, could you touch on the details and how we're patching those areas back in?
Yeah. It's basically what would be the south east corner of the parking lot, and the entrance would be replaced, and that's the area that we're talking about replacing.
Okay, so I was mistaken then. So this does still relate to the 225 still relates to the parking lot itself then. Okay, I thought it was something else within the park. My bad on that.
No, sorry, that's correct.
All right. Any other questions? All right, we'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, we're back to item A, which is approval of additional $11,000 for flooring replacement at the library. Have a motion by Hoyer and a second by, was it Helene? And our library director, Dee Dee Whitman, is here to tell us about this one.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for waiting for me. My apologies. So the item in front of you is a request for an additional $11,000 for a floor replacement project at the library. We had attempted to kind of do this in phases, so this would have been the first phase, and with the idea of saving taxpayer money. And when we went to begin this phase of the project, we discovered that there were some issues with where the seams lie in the current carpet, and it was really challenging to find, out of the myriad availability of carpet colors, something that would match with the rest of the carpet in the library, as well as the potential remainder. So if you have the diagrams in front of you, the first one just shows the two main corridors in the library and the current carpet. The second one shows the proposal for us to just kind of replace the middle T of the carpet, if you will. That's the highest traffic, but it also has the potential for some tripping issues as the transitions from the carpet to the tile have been worn down over the years. And that was my biggest concern for the project, and how we wanted to prioritize that so we can remove that obstacle in the library. We did have a young staff member who did have a cart of books dumped over on the lip. So we wanted to really make sure that this project goes through as quickly as possible. So I'm hoping that we can get an additional $11,000 for the project. So instead of just the little T, we can just complete both quarters of carpet for the library, and then we'll have the same carpet tiles and everything, so that we can just replace tile by tile in the future and not have to go through a larger project like this one.
So the total amount would be 28,
Yes.
the $28,000, and you have, what's in the budget?
The budget, it was budgeted for $18,500, and the project without the additional carpet was quoted under that, which I thought was great, at $16,900 something. But like I said, we're really hoping we can get the full carpet from end to end, if you will. We do have a very beautiful library, and it'd be nice to be able to have that all looking nice and then also be safe for the public.
Right, so it's actually just a little over 10,000.
Yes, I think I requested 11 because of the uncertainty in markets and getting almost anything these days, so.
Okay, yes, thank you. All right, Councilman Albertson?
At our library board meeting, we did discuss this and felt like the safety issue would be worth the $10,000. You know, it's hard to know when to start and when to stop on these projects, but I think in this case, it would be well warranted if Kristen can find the extra $11,000 to go ahead with this at this point.
All right, and you probably mentioned it, but where did you say that money was coming from?
Which might be additional 11,000.
The additional.
I would have to defer to Kristen for that.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Kristen.
So with this project being as it was budgeted and it's more of an overage, my suggestion would be, if the council's in agreement with that, that we would do it as a contingency transfer, which then would come out of the general fund's unreserved cash balance.
Okay. Councilwoman Manti?
Is this our first replacement of the carpet in there, the flooring?
Yes, since the building was opened in 2007.
We got our money's worth.
Really?
I think, I mean, for commercial carpeting and traffic. I think this is a really nicely defined project, actually. You know, it's the hallways, and we're not talking about spilling over or whatever. And I would have to agree with Dan that I would like to see the library both look good and function safely. So I would be in favor of extending the extra money.
Sure. Anyone else? Councilman Billhauer?
Thank you, Mayor. Question procedurally. I don't believe this is on the regular council agenda. Do we need to
We
take?
modified the agenda. It is in the consent agenda now.
Oh, it is?
We added it.
Okay, did not see that. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Councilman Roby?
Kristen, if you just comment, what is the shape of that reserve fund that this is coming from?
So I would take this would not fall probably into the capital improvement fund. I think we'll take this out of the general fund, unreserved fund balance. That one is sitting pretty good. You know, the general fund did take in the 5.5 million of the CARES Act funding last year in 2020. So it can handle this $11,000 overage at this time. And we also do budget the $300,000 contingency. So that's always kind of equated for in the cash balance as well. So with this being a contingency transfer, we've kind of incorporated that cash already.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? All right. Oh, Councilman Lallam.
Thank you, Mayor. Dee Dee, did I hear that was going to be carpet tile? Is that what those are going to be?
Yes, sir, that's going to be carpet tile.
So they'll be able to replace as long as they have tile that match?
Yes, and we are planning to get a certain number of boxes over with that in mind, because they don't know year from year if they'll be able to get us the same carpet. That's just the way the industry goes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Councilman Hoyer.
I'm definitely in support of this as well. Same reasons everyone stated. Just wanted to say we popped in Saturday, and it was really lovely for the kids. So excited to see some of those new things coming for the kiddos that you're planning. So
Wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. We're really loving it too. So everybody should stop in.
Yeah. All right. If there are no further comments or questions, look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item E is the long-range transportation plan presentation. Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a presentation here. It's been a little while in the works. If you recall, we entered into an agreement with the South Dakota DOT and selected a consultant, HDR, to perform a transportation master plan update for the city of Watertown. That has been progressing nicely throughout 2020. We've had to make a few unique modifications to that schedule due to COVID and some of the meetings and frankly some of the transportation, the traffic activities that we saw pretty much come to a halt in 2020 at certain points. We realized, and our design professionals realized, that wouldn't be a good time to perform some of the data collection that we normally would be doing. And so we had to put off some of that work until a more opportune time, which has now come to pass. And today I have with us here Dustin Hamilton and Tom Cook from HDR. Dustin's been the project lead on this for us as an HDR representative, working closely with Steve Graham with South Dakota DOT. And tonight they would like to provide a precursor to the draft document that we'll be receiving here in the coming weeks, and also make a few announcements about the public comment period that's open right now. With that, I'll hand it over to Dustin and let him and Tom walk through a presentation for us.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As Heath mentioned, I'm Dustin Hamilton, the project manager with HDR, and Tom Cook's done the lion's share of the traffic analysis for us. So glad to have Tom here to answer any questions today too. So the purpose of our presentation today is to introduce the project to you. Some of you have been involved as part of the study advisory team, and others haven't. So I want to give you an update on what we've done for the existing conditions analysis, the future conditions analysis, standards development that was part of the scope, and public involvement, and then the roadmap to the finish line here. And as Heath mentioned, Steve Graham with the DOT is the project manager for the DOT. I'm the consultant project manager, and several of you, thank you for your participation in the project to date as well. We've had DOT area staff involved, as well as DOT region staff, and then other members of HDR here with our study team. So a little bit of background. The last master transportation plan update was prepared in 2005, and then guided needs and improvements since that time. And as we all know, as development changes and traffic levels and patterns change, a new look ahead is necessary. It will impact your transportation network. And this update reviewed all modes of travel, including highway, bicycle, pedestrian, transit, air, and freight, and targeted goals for the 20-year or 2040 planning horizon. Our scope and tasks with this project included the baseline conditions analysis, which looked at the current network, the standards development, which was kind of the catch-all for several issues that were identified in the RFP, including the review of transportation-related design standards, the major street plan update, a review of maintenance practices, including pavement maintenance, and the bicycle and pedestrian plan facility review and update. And then what we did was took a look at what the future year traffic volumes are going to be. We looked at a 10-year or 2030 and then a 20-year or 2040 planning horizon to identify any growth-related or capacity needs that we see that you'll be facing in the future. Another significant component of the scope was public involvement, and then the last deliverable is the final report. So to give you a little bit of background here on the planning level review of the existing network and elements, we looked at segments or areas of roadways between intersections. We had a list of study intersections to review capacity needs at, and then we conducted a planning level review of the existing bike and pedestrian facilities, air, transit, bus, and freight. And as part of that, the DOT provided us the last 5 years of crash data, and so we did a safety review as well for the data that was from 2015 through 2019. And to give you a little bit of an idea on the roadway segment and intersection analysis, we like to grade that, if you will, similar to a school grading scale, where A is good, would be free flow operation, and F is bad or a traffic jam. And so as we get into some of these figures, you'll be able to see the street segments and intersections where if they're coded green, they're in good shape. If they're red, it's bad shape. So just to kind of to preface that, what you'll see here coming up on the next couple slides. And overall, your current network performs very well. As you can see on the map, there's only a few street segments here that are getting to that threshold of capacity where some improvements might need to be made. Let's see. Oh, okay. So up here you can see up on 14th Avenue, 10th Avenue, and then Kemp Avenue here, we're starting to get into that 80 to 100% capacity range. And so those were the only real segments where we thought there might be some needs kind of heading into the future conditions analysis. And so to move right into that, we conducted the same review, but we looked at the future year traffic forecast. So using growth factors from Coddington County, taking a look at your comprehensive plan and trying to identify where that growth is going to occur, and taking those traffic volumes forward into the future. We reviewed the same network, but with the new traffic volumes, and identified where we really need to target and focus those improvements in the future. And no surprise, some of the similar segments started to appear. However, in 2030, a couple of those segments reached that capacity threshold, that being 14th Avenue and then Kemp Avenue, and 10th Avenue then still shows up in 2030 as in that 80% range, but then once we get into 2040 on the second graphic, that 10th Avenue section meets capacity as well, which is pretty timely with what you're doing, because based on what we understand with the 10th Avenue improvements, what your staff has proposed here with the 3-lane section should set you up for success through the 2040 planning horizon without any issues going to the 3-lane section. So good work on that project.
Good to know.
And then we also looked at several of the study intersections as well. There were 5 intersections that begin to show congestion and reach unacceptable levels of delay based on the existing intersection configuration. A few of those are noted right here, North Maple and 14th, the US 212 ramp terminal for the southbound direction, US 212 and 23rd Street southeast, 29th Street southeast, and 15th Avenue, and 81 and 18th Avenue. So what we've then done is taken a look at some of the improvements that would need to be done to address those capacity issues. And what we've come up here for most of the street segments, simply installing a turn lane or a two-way left turn lane or a left turn lane at the major intersections in most cases are going to address your long-term needs on a segment basis. So that's pretty darn good news. You know, you're not looking to have to put significant improvements in dollars in to, you know, widen a two-lane section out to a five-lane section based on what we found here. And then intersection improvements, we've got quite a list here, but for the most part, again, we're looking at adding left turn lanes or right turn lanes at the study intersections. There are two intersections which we've identified could meet some signal warrants in the future. By 2030, we are thinking the US 212 and 23rd Street Southeast intersection would reach signal warrants, and then by 2040, the 29th Street Southeast and 15th Ave Southeast intersection based upon growth in both of those corridors.
Hey, Dustin, if you could go back to that last slide.
Yep.
I was just going to reiterate, you touched on this too, but like the level of service that drops on like 14th Avenue over the years, luckily up there we're so wide that we could easily go in and stripe in these designated left turn lanes at certain intersections, and then that dramatically increases that level of service back up to an acceptable level for the community. Those are some things that are easy to do, like Dustin indicated. We've been working with Rob, the street superintendent, and pay attention to these particular streets and locations. Some of these we've already noticed and have already started conversations on seeing the traffic back up in certain areas of these streets, and so we'll continue to monitor these things. And I guess the point I was trying to make there is that we've got that flexibility to make some of these modifications and improve that level of service without having to go in and widen roads like we're having to do on 10th Avenue. For the most part, that seems to be the case, so that's good news.
What's the V to C ratio?
So that's the volume to capacity. So the volume is the current in the existing conditions analysis versus in the 2030 and 2040 is the forecasted volume, and then the capacity is a threshold that we've used based upon the facility type. So for instance, for like a 3-lane section, the upper threshold of 3-lane section can handle is about that 14,000 trips a day. So. And we've summarized the needed improvements in a chart and in a map, which is available on our current online public meeting. So I just wanted to give that a little plug ahead of time. So if you haven't had a chance, visit the current public meeting that's going on. I will give a little bit more information about that here in just a second. The next item that we worked on was the standards development segment of the study. We looked at the major streets and roadway classification system, the truck route network, emergency and hospital snow routes, pavement maintenance and rehabilitation, the design standards and development coordination, where we looked at the current city design standards, as well as a few transportation-related development items that the staff has made us aware of. Overall traffic level of service, and then bicycle and pedestrian review as well. So the first one is the major streets and roadway classification system. We took a look at the classifications in the current functional classification map with regard to the comprehensive plan, or working with staff to make some updates there so both documents correspond to one another very well. We've also identified improvements to expand the road network, most notably, which I think this has been on the docket for quite some time, but that north-west connector, if you will, from I-29 over to Highway 20. We also have included some of the recommendations that have come out of the US 212 corridor study with regard to 11th, 14th, 17th, and 19th down there in the commercial core. A collector grid expansion for the growth areas, most notably in the northern and eastern portions of the community. So trying to identify here and give you a roadmap, if you will, as new development comes in, so you can plan your arterial and collector network with that ongoing development. We also took a look at the truck route network and reviewed the current truck route ordinance. I don't believe there's an official truck route map right now with your ordinance, so what we've looked at here is putting together a map and then provided some considerations for the truck route ordinance. Basically identifying here the US 212 and US 81 corridors, Highway 20, and then also based on discussions with staff, the 14th Avenue Northwest corridor is being used as kind of that interim northwest bypass right now for truck traffic. So wanted to give some suggestions and an opportunity to formalize a truck route map. And then we also took a look at the emergency and hospital routes and snow routes and are making some recommendations for future additions on the arterial and collector network, and then any opportunities in the future as your critical services expand, trying to get those included as well on that emergency route map. And I think in our last meeting, Rob had mentioned that he's going to be looking at doing some updates to this pretty soon. So. We did take a look at the pavement maintenance and rehab, reviewed the 2017 pavement maintenance study, and then your current practices that have been ongoing since that project was taken on. What we found, of course, is pavement is a significant asset to the city. I think that 2017 study identified that that asset has a value of approximately $138 million. So a big asset for the city that needs proper management so it can remain in good shape. And that study did identify at the time that the current pavement condition index for the city was at a 61 or a good rating, and that falls within what most communities that these types of studies go on that have a good rating. They usually range between the 60 and 65. So 61 falls right in line with a lot of other communities that these types of studies occur in. The goal of that project was to establish a $2.4 million annual plan, and by doing that and following those recommendations, they had anticipated that pavement condition index rating to rise to a 63, and controlling the backlog or the list of streets that you still need to do repair on at 15%, which is a good target. And so based on what we found in talking with Heath, it appears that you have been budgeting that $2.4 million annually since that has been done. So basically what we had recommended is that you would come back in, do another survey to validate that what you had thought was going to happen is in fact happening, and the condition of those streets is staying in that good range. And we also found out during our last SAT meeting that I think you're planned to do that inspection yet this summer. So I think that's good news, and will ensure that you target those dollars wisely, and the improvements that you are making are following the goal that had been established. Then we took a look at the design standards as well, specifically for transportation-related design criteria. Overall, the standards that you adopted in 2020 are comprehensive. They're very consistent with some of the other communities in the region. We did find a couple things where we had made some suggestions to update with your next round of revisions. A couple of those include for traffic impact studies, adding some components with regard to access control and access spacing, and then also addressing multimodal and bike or pedestrian facility improvements that those developments may need to make in order to tie into your system. And finally, adding, you have turn lane design numbers, but you didn't have a graphic or a figure that kind of lays out how to design the turn lane in accordance with those warrants that you have. And so we'd proposed a figure that could be added in that would help with the turn lane design as well. And then some of the items on development coordination that we identified talking with staff were with regard to subdivision connectivity and potential missed opportunities between subdivisions, where you may have a subdivision next to each other and they didn't tie a street together, and so you have to go around the network to get across to the next development. Half streets was another one. This is what's showing, just an example showing up there on 16th Avenue, where there's a half street in place replace rural cross-section streets or streets with no curb and gutter, when to pave gravel roads, and then there are several streets that have wide rights-of-way in town that are above what the current standard would be, and there may be some opportunity there to right size, if you will, the right of way and narrow it up and turn some of that property back. And so what we've done is addressed each of these topics in our memo that we have currently on the public meeting site right now. And in the essence of time today, I won't go through all of those, but just to kind of give you a precursor of what we did look at. As far as the bicycle and pedestrian system plan, we looked at the 2002 sidewalk study and the 2012 Watertown master trail plan. And basically what we did here was to try to target a few improvements, not necessarily recreate the wheel on the new trails, but look at some items where it would enhance the network without a huge cost. As you'll see in that memo, you know, if you built all those trails, it's a big number. So we wanted to look at what we could do for the key pedestrian intersections and crossings, identify any mid-block crossings that may be a benefit, look at off-street trails and those crossings, on-street bike facilities, and then the sidewalk network gaps. And we followed several different guidance documents for that, including FHWA guidance, the North American City Transportation Officials Designing for All Ages and Abilities guidance, and then one thing that we found here in the region that really builds well off of the FHWA guidance was the City of Boulder, Colorado crossing treatment guidelines, and they're recognized in the region for identifying some solutions that are built off that FHWA platform. As far as the key intersections and crossings go, we reviewed that 2012 feeder linkage network, as it was called, and looked at improvements with regard to any pedestrian connectivity issues, sidewalk gaps, ADA accessibility, any pedestrian safety issues. And for each of those 50 crossings, we identified a proposed crossing treatment. And this just gives you an idea of those crossings that we looked at and provided some suggestions for. We also looked at a few key mid-block crossings that would hopefully improve some access to schools. Those locations to possibly consider for mid-block crossings, 2 of them are on 11th there by the high school and Lake Area Technical Institute, where we have parking lots and facilities across the street from each other, as well as down on 4th Avenue Southeast between 2nd and 3rd Street Southeast near the Roosevelt Elementary School. As far as the off-street trails go, we do believe that you have a strong network of existing off-street trails, and as I mentioned, we really, as far as that goes, provided some additional detail and then brought the costs up to current 2020 levels, and then did provide some options for key trail crossing locations using different treatments. So again, you'll see a table with proposed solutions for those crossings to enhance visibility. Finally, here on the on-street bike facilities, there's 4 existing shoulder or on-street routes. We considered additional on-street or shoulder routes based upon the existing right-of-way widths that you have available on the network, traffic speeds and volumes, and then the adjacent land use context. So where you have higher intensity land use, that's an area where we wouldn't necessarily want to focus an on-street facility, but we did identify 6 possible new corridors using conventional bike lanes, a buffered bike lane, or in some instances even a bicycle boulevard where basically you use the sharrows and cars and bikes can leverage the same space because the traffic volumes are so low. And then the final item on the bike ped was the sidewalk network gaps. Some of you may be familiar with that 2002 sidewalk study. There are several areas where, of course, sidewalks don't currently exist. What we do is recommend a 2-tier system for that for implementation. Tier 1 being those feeder linkage or main pedestrian routes, and then on school routes as well. And then Tier 2 would be everything else. And the dollars are quite large when if you were to try to go in and build all these sidewalks. So we certainly recommend trying to implement those with your pavement maintenance projects when you're in neighborhoods and things like that. And some other communities have budgeted, because it is a priority for them, a separate, X amount of dollars a year and go get as much sidewalk done as you can. So that's another option if sidewalks are important to you and completing some of those gaps. Finally, public involvement. We do have a project website that's active, www.watertownmtp.com. We've, due to COVID, of course, had 2 public meetings through this website. The first meeting was in January. We did have 233 views on that meeting, which we thought was pretty good attendance. In conjunction with that public meeting number 1, we also had an online transportation needs survey. There were 29 respondents that took time to complete that survey, and it was a 17-question survey, and I think we did get some good feedback with regard to transportation needs that the community thinks is necessary. And then public meeting number 2 is currently going on right now. It's going through in detail the transportation future solutions that we talked about today. And it will run through the end of the month. So far, as of last Friday, we've had 64 people take part in that public meeting as well. We had 1 comment actually came in over the phone. We haven't had any written comments. One citizen was interested in some of the engine brake signage based on some issues that they have out there on the east side of town, and so we did forward that comment on to the DOT area office, but that's the only comment we've received so far. So if you go onto the homepage, it looks just like this. You can just click on the online meeting link, and there's a presentation, and then all of the memos with the detailed analysis are available online. And finally, just wrapping up here, basically we are here in May doing the online public meeting 2. We're working on assembling the draft report right now. So once online meeting number 2 wraps up here at the end of the month, we'll put a summary together and hopefully get the draft report submitted to the staff and the study advisory team for review in June. Give them an opportunity to go through the report, provide any comments that they have, and then ultimately get that final report submitted in July. So I know that was a lot going on here, but we're happy to answer any questions that you have at this point, and hopefully you'll get a chance to take a look at that online meeting and participate.
Yes. Who has questions or comments? Who wants to start? Councilman Hoyer.
So just because we touched on it, with the bike trails, the on-street ones have always been a concern for me just because we don't have buffering between those, and they're on pretty busy roadways. And when you have young riders, such as 6 to 7-year-olds, they're a little bit shaky. So looking between the 3 suggestions you kind of had there, you mentioned buffering a little bit. Is that one of the more maybe sought after routes? If we're not going to take it off street, would that be one of the better options for us, is to at least get a physical buffer in between it?
Yes, that's certainly one option, and that's kind of shown in this lower right corner here, where basically you get some striping in there, get 3 or 4 feet, and try to separate that traffic a little bit, and it certainly is more comfortable than the center one, where it's a traditional bike lane where the traffic's right there beside you. So that definitely will lower the level of traffic stress that you feel by having a buffered lane in there.
Sure. I guess for me, I'm asking more so buffered as in an actual physical. So there's almost like, I've seen it with Boulder because Boulder's such a good example of how they handle a lot of this stuff, but the actual physical metal kind of, it's almost like a flower planter in a way. It's just one of those concerns with cell phones and distracted drivers these days to have something that they can physically tap before it's actually a bike. So I don't know if will that be included in the study, those sorts of things?
We have looked at it, and this is one example here, if you can see on the picture, that we've identified also for pedestrian as well, where you could put in like a curb, something like that, where there would be a physical barrier as well. So that's certainly something that we're looking at.
Okay, great, thank you. It really is top of mind from going into summer, and then I actually already bumped into some tourists that were here specifically to ride our bike trails. So I know, that's the first time I've gotten that one, so it was very neat. They rode it on their bicycles, but yeah. But they, yeah, it's just cool to see, because we do have a really extensive bike trail. It's just making sure we have a safe one and maintained one.
Counselor Manti?
Just to piggyback on that, I know that some of our bike trails cross some fairly significantly busy areas. It was hard to tell from, maybe the drawings and things like that. What were some of the possible solutions in that plan, treatments as it were, to enhance those pretty busy crossings there where the...
So one solution is the Hawk system, which you have one out here up on Highway 81 right now, where you have basically a full-blown pedestrian signal. You have other opportunities to install like rapid flashing beacons. That's something that's shown here, where the user, sorry, my timing must be off here, where the user can hit the activation and then you get rapid flashing of the beacons there. Or the other thing that we've identified in some of the locations would be a refuge island if necessary to shorten up the crossing width, so you don't need to cross such a wide expanse in a single movement. So, but we've got a whole list of different options that could be considered based upon the level of crossing.
So is that just considered for pedestrian traffic or for bicycle traffic?
Both.
Okay.
That middle picture that Dustin referenced, the rectangular rapid flash beacons, are actually what we're installing on 10th Avenue North at the 2nd Street intersection for that school, that pedestrian traffic up there.
Councilman Hoyer?
I was curious, because you mentioned some of our roads that are a little bit wider than standard. And it's just, again, it's top of mind because I was just in Madison. They have some sections of roadways that have boulevards in the middle. Do we have roads that would be pretty amenable to something like that to narrow it down? Because then that would add some beautification. And, I mean, you could even do trees with blossoms on it, that kind of thing. That's what, I was just very struck by it when I was in Madison, so.
So what we really looked at, I think, the intention of in our standards development with regard to the wide right-of-way was actually consolidating the right-of-way width, because for several of the streets there's 80 plus feet of right-of-way, and the current if you were building a new, say, Collector Street, the recommendation is 66 foot. So there's that excess. So we didn't look at specifically, widening the infrastructure out within the right of way. What we were actually tasked to look at was how you could go about getting rid of or vacating small portions to narrow up the right of way for maintenance purposes, basically. So, but that's something you certainly could look at in those wide right-of-way streets if you wanted traffic calming or something like that. But for capacity needs, we didn't look at that.
Councilor Albertson?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. You said the second meeting was going to be virtual. Is there any merit, because you do have a lot of information, to making that a live meeting? I mean, things have changed considerably now with the CDC and the recommendations. I understand what you're saying, but there's something to be said about sitting here, all of us listening to you and watching, as opposed to sitting with the computer where kids are running around, or, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Is there any option, or is it too late for that?
I absolutely know that and agree with you. At this point, being the DOT is running it, we're following their protocols with the study. The last that I have heard, they were not having any in-person meetings until after June 1st. I need to follow up with Steve again on that to see. But what we've actually found is the participation in just sheer numbers has actually been higher than we would typically see. But I agree, and I think a lot of the studies that are going forward here are going to do a combination of both, because as you mentioned, folks like to come, some folks like to come and sit down and talk with the study team, and we're used to doing that. It's been kind of different for us to go, completely online. But I think things going forward will be a combination of both, and that's something we can certainly follow up with the DOT on and see.
Councilor Vilhauer?
Thank you, Mayor. You said your study did look at safety issues. Does that include speed limits in various areas?
So we did look at all of the reasons for the crashes, and if speeding or there's a myriad of issues that have been identified as causal factors of crashes. We would identify if speeding was a concern, and Tom went through all of the crash data. I don't recall any speeding items being brought up, but.
I've got a specific, and I brought this up a couple different times with the DOT along with former Police Chief McPeak, a section of town that has concerned me for a long time. I've had people tell me that they forbid their children to drive that area. And I realize the purpose of your speeding is, you want to get people through an area quickly as possible, as safely as possible. And I'm referencing 212. 212 from the east, whether you're coming into town or going out of town, you do a nice job of slowing traffic down. You go 65, I think goes 55, 45, 35. Very nice job. I can't say that on the west side of town. You're coming in at 65 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you're hitting 45, and that 45, people aren't going to slow down to 45 immediately. So as a result, you've got people cruising by the event center. I've had event center staff telling me that people are cruising by there on the west end of town, still going that 55 to 60, if not 65 yet. And specifically an area that is of concern to me, and Chief McPeak is waiting on this as well, is 21st Street out there. If you were trying to get either onto 212 or onto 21st Street, especially at various times of the day, there's that traffic that's either going out or coming in, especially coming into town yet. That's a hazard out there. Now, like I say, I brought it up a couple different times since I'm on the council. The DOT says, nope, the signage and the speed limit is right out there, but that is still a concern of mine, so I want to raise that again. And if there's anything that you folks can take a look at there as far as addressing that, I just think that 45 needs to be moved out further or staggered from 65 to 55 to 45 or something, rather than the 45 where it is going from the 65. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Counselor Hoyer?
I know we identified the locations without sidewalk. I was wondering as we were doing the street analysis, maybe I missed it, I didn't think I did, but Ward C sees some of this to the west of the high school. There's some other spots too that don't have it, but curb and gutter within the community. I know there's sections where we're just flat out missing it, or it'll jump one house and then all of a sudden it reappears. Was that analyzed within this as well?
Not specifically in the urban areas, but we did look at the rural cross-section streets and some issues with those where you may be expanding the city limits and annexing areas that don't have curb and gutter currently, as well as identifying some recommendations and standards for when more rural type development, even in the city, say an acre or larger lots, some recommendations on how to set those up so they would function well. Some of the issues that we usually see, if the front setbacks aren't large enough for the homes, they creep up to the street, and then the drainage ditch that's supposed to be there disappears. People want to pipe it, and then it makes a mess of your roadway. So we identified some standards for those type rural residential type properties or new developments, but no, we didn't go in and do a comprehensive analysis on current areas that are missing curb and gutter.
Okay, thank you.
To that point, Councilman Hoyer, I would add that on a per project basis, that's something definitely the staff will keep paying attention to. What we like to do is on a per project basis, we look at the continuity of curb and gutter, whether it's the old square curb or the new style curb that we conventionally use now today, and where appropriate, we don't have any issue incorporating a curb replacement into the projects. Of course, funding being available for an addition like that to a project, but those are things that we'll continue to be sensitive to and keep an eye out for as well.
Okay, just wondering, Heath, and thank you for that. Do we have anything in place for the older neighborhoods that just don't have them? Or is that treated kind of like Sidewalk gets treated, or do we just wait till sale of home and then try to address it?
For the older neighborhoods, again, if we come through with a pavement maintenance or rehab project, we would definitely look at it at that time. If we wanted to go in on a more proactive basis and look at maybe doing a curb assessment, I mean, that's always an option for the council as well. if the staff, or for that matter, the residents wanted to bring a petition forward for an assessment project like that, we can definitely be the facilitators, help facilitate those kind of needs.
Sure. Thank you, Heath.
Other questions or comments? Just looking briefly, it looked like the south interchange that was in the 2005 master transportation plan is gone. Is that going to be in the report?
It will be, based upon our last study advisory team meeting. We're planning to put some guidance in on kind of steps to the future, if you will, how you can set yourself up for when that need does come forth, and you would need another interchange to the south. So that's one thing that we will be adding into our draft final report. So.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much, and if you haven't taken the survey yet, go on to the public meeting, and it's not really a survey, but there's a place for comments, right?
Yes, yep. You can type in comments as you go, or wait till the end, and there's a comment box there where we'll take any and all comments, and if you want to email us, we're happy to do that, or pick up the phone and call too. We've had some, as I mentioned, some folks call us as well. So.
Good deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right, item F is authorization to allocate funding for the Watertown Foundation Plaza project, project number 2030, supplementing the 2021 budget in the amount of $1,005,000 for a total project amount of $3,005,000. And I think we should wait on a motion. We're going to be discussing some options that you might want to include in a motion. So, and we are discussing this at the full council meeting as well as an agenda item, and I do expect some members of the downtown area to come and have something to say about it. So at this time, I want to focus on options for paying. So I'm going to go ahead and let the Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, kick it off and see where it goes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. Of course, Public Works and the Engineering Division have just played a small role in this overall. There have been a lot of people, a lot of community members, a lot of developers, and teams of that sort that have come together with the design committee that have gotten us to the point we are now today. Justin Peterson is the project manager for the City Engineering Office. He's been working closely with John Jacobson, who's with Confluence. If you recall, we entered into a design contract with Confluence back in, I believe it was August of 2020, to go ahead and perform the design and bidding services for a downtown park. That downtown park has since modified, evolved. Its name has evolved now to Foundation Plaza. And again, part of the reason being the Watertown Community Foundation's played a crucial role in some of the funding for this project to be a success. They've donated, I believe, up to $500,000. I think that $500,000, my understanding is that will come in $100,000 a year over the next 5 years. And so I wanted to provide that as part of the background here. We also have available for us as part of the funding that's in line for this project is the Urban Renewal Fund monies that were collected through, I forget whether it's through 2019 or 2020 or a combination of both. But the total there that we're sitting on is roughly about $35,000 in funds from the Urban Renewal Fund monies that were collected. With those two revenue sources, we then obviously have the city's CIP, and that's where the brunt of the load is being carried for this project. The current fiscal year budget is $2 million for the Foundation Plaza. And as we work through the design, which again has taken a design committee of several downtown stakeholders and developers and people with business owners that represent the downtown area. Some council members are involved with this design committee as well, and of course some staff members along with the consultant. So there's been a few steps along the way where we've looked at design options. The committee has kind of arm wrestled with the facts and the natures of these kind of parks and what we think will work best and is needed for the city of Watertown for this park to be a success and for it to be very well utilized and embraced by the community on a regular basis year round. And that's what's brought us to today, is a design that the design committee is recommending to the council that includes some turf installation instead of natural grass, and also an ice feature for the winter months so that we have some winter usage of the park. Those two things, along with the rest of the design work, which include a playground area, of course the stage being one of the main centerpieces of the park for performances downtown, and things of that nature. All those things combined, where we sit right now today, the estimate is coming in at about $3 million, just over $3 million. And so that, of course, has raised a flag for the committee to press the pause button here briefly to talk to the council and try to figure out where we should move forward with this and how to accomplish a downtown park. So there are some options. John Jacobson is online with us today, along with Justin Peterson. And again, like the mayor indicated, what we were primarily wanting to focus on right now is the funding options. And if the council were to entertain adding another $1 million to this project, where that funding might come from. And engineering staff, and talking internally with other staff, with the finance officer, we have ideas, we have a couple options, but really that's what we wanted this discussion to be, is try to continue to bounce around some further ideas. I'll just quickly cite a couple of those ideas that were mentioned. One of the stances council could take is we simply don't have any more in the CIP to put towards this, and we could ask for public donations to make up the difference for this extra $1 million. The private donations for the public park. That is obviously one option that could be exercised. Another option is that this money simply can't be budgeted in 2021 because there's really nothing in the CIP that we can pull $1 million from. All the projects we have going now have pretty well been bid. There's a few smaller ones that remain to be bid, but like 10th Avenue, 3rd Avenue Mill and Overlay, things of that nature, we simply don't have an extra $1 million in the 2021 CIP. And in talking with, again, Chris and the finance officer, and I'll let her speak to that, but whether there's any reserves to pull from or contingencies, it sounds like she's has reservations with that in mind. So the other second option is we can move forward with this $3 million plan and simply budget the additional $1 million in the upcoming 2022 project funds. Now this park could break ground this year. We're planning and hoping to break ground this year, but it will not be completed this year. So by budgeting the extra $1 million in the 2022 CIP, that gives the council some flexibility to not have to find it out of this year's CIP. And then, of course, the third option is maybe a hybrid of that. We meet in the middle and say, okay, the city will fund another $500,000 if we can get another $500,000 in donations from the businesses or user groups throughout the community that want to see this park built in a way that the committee feels is appropriate. So we thought we'd just throw out those three options for discussion purposes, and I'll let the mayor take it from there with how the council would like to proceed with the discussions.
Okay, thank you. And I'm looking through the packet, and I don't see any alternative for anything that fits within the budget. The budget's currently $2 million, and so how do we, if the council says $2 million's the top, what do we get for that?
That's a good question. I'd have to refer that question over to John. John, if you could chime in on that. I will say that we can, for $2.5 million, unplug the ice, unplug the turf, and then we're sitting around that $2.5 million when you unplug those two components. If I'm wrong on that, John, please correct me, but I know that brings us down to the 2.5 by removing those two items. And there's room to remove other items, but again, I'll let John expand on what that might look like.
Thank you, Heath. I think, Mayor, to answer your question, right now, based on our work with the committee up to this point, for the elements that we've reviewed and kind of the primary concept that everybody has agreed to, we have that current estimate of $2.5 million. That does include all the total fees for design, construction contract administration, all that kind of stuff. So they're obviously between the bid and those construction contract costs. some of those dollars could fluctuate a little bit. Still to this point, because obviously they're not written in stone yet. The main thing that we would have to do to get the project down to $2 million would be to work with the committee to talk about what items we are potentially going to take out of the design, whether that's reducing the size of the water feature play area, the size of the overall play area. Maybe there's some other improvements that we design as an ad alternate, so that we have a base project anticipated of being $2 million. So I think our goal at this point was to work with the committee and the city and the council to verify what that exact budget is going to be, and then kind of detail the final design from there, because at this point we're only in what you call the design development stage, and that's where we reaffirm the program and also the potential cost, but we still have to go into construction documents and bid documents to put the total bid package together.
Okay, thank you. So I did ask the council to let me know if how they see the gift of $500,000 that the foundation is offering to us. Do they see that as lowering the amount coming out of the city budget to 1.5, or do they see it as raising the budget up to 2.5? And it was split, half and half. So we need to get beyond that so we can tell the designers what to design. And if we're going to go with the 2.5, that money doesn't come all at once. So we do have to budget extra money out of city funds. And the $500,000 will come back annually in increments. But I'm curious of what people are thinking of how can we do this. Council members, Councilman Villar?
I guess I would like to hear, we've got at least two of you that are on that committee. I guess I'd like to hear what the committee itself is saying, because I think I got some feedback someplace along the line that the committee itself was rather split in their thinking on this, or not necessarily unanimous. Maybe I'm misspeaking there, but I guess I'd like to hear from what the committee members themselves have to say.
Sure. So it's been developing as it goes. The key thing that was said from the start is whatever we do, let's do it right. Don't backpedal on it. So as we were going here, we've just been kind of tossing around the routes to go. If we could do the ice, let's do it right. And at one point, it was just kind of out of the question because it was so expensive. That changed when we found the alternative that's being proposed here. That's why you'll see in the packet that they're strongly advocating that we go that route. But it's just been, how do we finance it? What's the price going to be? And we didn't get a price tag here until a little bit later in the game. To be honest with you, it's that same issue. Everybody's been hitting where costs just keep changing on us. But I don't know that it was so much split. I think it was just, if this was something that needed to be pushed out, since the ice is potentially incremental, that it could, because it rolls out in the winter, that you could do that at a later date if you saw fit. Like that could be an option as something you added on. Or we could just do it right from the get-go and get a 4-season park. That's kind of the challenge right now, because South Dakota, everything, we could say it's a 3-season park. It's really like a 1.5-season park, because it gets a little cold a little fast here. If we don't pursue that ice feature, then the warming room won't get as much use probably as it would have in the winter. So it's really just determining what's the return on investment. I don't know that it was so much split on whether to do the ice, just how do we want to implement it, I think was more so some of the discussion.
So Michael, safe to say, so the ice was the issue that probably is most under discussion at the committee level? I would say, yeah, that's been the biggest discussion, was if yes, no, how. That's been a long time discussion in this. And we didn't want to go with some super cheap option. We decided pretty firmly, if it's not going to be of quality, then don't do that, and then give the public something that's really subpar.
if we're going to do it, make sure it is something that has enough substance and quality to be worthwhile. It's one of those things, cry once and then you don't have to buy it again. So we found an alternative that made a lot of sense. It uses essentially rollout sheets that have glycol that gets pumped underneath it. If you're familiar with that, it's a chilling agent that allows things to stay frozen so that we don't get the same issues that we have with the outdoor rink that's over by LATC, where we get a warm winter day and then it slushes up on people and then it's just kind of a mess. So they found an alternative that came after a couple weeks of looking, actually, and that's what this is proposing. So they give you a few options. The committee was firmly sitting that it's worthwhile to do that ice just so it turns into that four-season park that we can use year-round. It'd be the only one like it in Watertown.
So we have two other council members that were on the committee, Councilors Mantee and Bueller. Do you want to add to that?
I did not participate in that.
You didn't participate?
Past the first meeting.
Oh, okay.
I really feel that Mike kind of summarized where we were at. And definitely, again, do it right or don't do it. We've talked a lot about the benefits of that park, and, that's not something we have in this particular area. It's, available to people. It's not a cost item for our citizens to use. I mean, obviously we have to pay for it, but to use. And so I think a lot of it was, okay, now we figured out what we really want, and now we found an alternative to the ice that is not, the high end, but this is really, really a good option. And so I think there's a lot of us who just want to make sure we get it all done. I did propose at one time also that maybe we could phase something in, with the donation or extending the budget from 21 to 22. And those are options that still exist, but I guess what I'm going to say is that, from my opinion, we have a lot of private individuals, private companies that have put a ton of money into downtown, and they're really building up the infrastructure for us down there. And so we're going to have a lot of people living down there. We're going to have a lot more foot traffic, people, whatever. And so this, to me, is a way the city can say we're behind all of the people who are making these big investments, the business owners, the builders who are making these large investments with housing and things like that. So our role as a city to do it right is that it's not small, it's small on the big scale, but I mean, let's make this investment to show that we're behind all of the people who've made all these private investments downtown. And, they're taking bigger risks. They're putting in millions and millions. And I guess I'm just getting on my soapbox here for a minute and saying that this is something the city can show that we can do that will be of a benefit to a very, very large number of people, that isn't costing us $7 million, $8 million, $10 million. We're not building a new building, things like that, but yet it's supporting all the construction and all of the development that's going downtown. And we're just seeing more and more happening every day. We've got contractors that are buying buildings. We've got, things like that. So as we're, the reason I brought this up is as we're considering this, I would like you to keep that in mind, that is this something the city of Watertown needs to figure out how we're going to do it and do it right so that we're a participant downtown in a way that doesn't cost us so much money, but yet we spend enough to do it right and to show our commitment to downtown.
All right, we're running out of time, but I know others have input they want to give, and this is on the agenda for the council meeting. So if you have something real short to say about the money part of it, not about the benefit of the park, we're going to get into that, but just about an idea about how we would fund it. That's kind of what I want to throw out there. We do have some money coming from the federal government that has restrictions, and one of the of appropriate uses is things that lead to tourism, which you could see that here. But Councilman Albertson, I know you wanted to say something.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very quickly, a lot of us back when we were first talking about this, this park came up kind of, all of a sudden, and we thought we were talking about ice sheets, and all of a sudden we were talking about downtown park. There were a lot of things going on at one time, and I for one, think that this park has some tremendous value for Watertown. And I think that we need to talk to Kristen and say, okay, the ice rinks, Reed and his group did a great job of getting that in. This is not short, by the way. Reed has done a great job, that group, and Bruce, these guys did a great job getting that those ice sheets in. I think that there's money that we can find to do this thing right, and if we don't do it right now, we're not going to do it right. So I'll talk more on it later if it's need to be, but I think that it's really changed a lot in the last 8 months since when we were talking about we're going to take this money away from the ice rinks, we're going to take it away from. So anyway, I'll talk later. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to cut the conversation off now and move through the agenda. Is there any old business, real quick? Any new business? We do not have a reason to go into executive session, so there being no further business right now, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned, and we'll take a 5-minute break and come back for the council meeting.